What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bass. In today's video, we are talking about my top 5 topwater baits you should be fishing this summer. All right, guys, my last video, I gave you guys some summer topwater tricks and tips. If you guys haven't watched that video already, we'll link that down below in the video description. You guys should go watch that because it's got some, we talk about colors and some hook upgrades, that sort of stuff, when and what to look for. But in that video, if you guys watch that video, I didn't really talk about a ton of different baits, but in that video I mentioned that maybe my next video I might give you guys my top 5 summertime topwater baits, because I love throwing topwater and summertime is a great time to do it. You know, you add the grass factor in, right? Now we're talking about frogs and weedless topwaters and buzz baits and all that stuff. I knew it was going to be hard limiting it to basically 5 baits, but guys, this was extremely hard because I got a lot of topwaters. I probably have, I don't know, what do I have in here? I probably have 3 different topwater boxes. I mean, here's just my frog box, right? There's my boat topwater box. There's my spot topwater box, and there's my clear water topwater box. So yeah, I got some topwaters in here, and it was really hard to limit this to 5 baits. So basically, I think I succeeded. I'll have to count after. But guys, I love throwing topwater all the way back to the good old days. I mean, this is what I started throwing, right? The jitterbug, the hula popper, way back when I was just a little kid walking it and fishing ponds. These were some of my favorite topwater baits. And now you have baits that are so beautiful and realistic looking. And then you have some stuff that's some kind of emerging categories. We're gonna talk about that here. But it was tough, really, to limit this to 5. But I think I got 5 categories, and I'm gonna give you 1 or 2 in each category, and then you guys can branch out from there, you know, depending on the fishery that you're on, whether it's a highland reservoir, clear water, or you're on a river system with a ton of backwaters and grass. I have some baits for you either way. So without further ado, my number 1 topwater for summertime, and now this applies to basically all the different types of fisheries, whether it's a highland or lowland reservoir, a natural lake or a pond, a river system, you know, a delta, that sort of thing. I'm going with a walking bait, a bait that goes side to side. Now, with that said, specifically the shower blows. This is the 105. It comes in some really cool colors. Again, I'm not gonna touch on colors too much because I did in that previous topwater tricks video, but having a smaller profile, especially this 105, this thing has a weight transfer system in it. Guys, I can throw this thing so far, 50, 60 yards. So this applies to your highland reservoirs. Maybe you have some offshore largemouth or spots blowing up on shad, or your backwaters on your river systems, but you don't necessarily have grass on the surface yet. This is something that you can you can fish shade lines, you can fish around cypress trees or dock pilings, get that side to side spinning action. And again, this bait isn't very large. It's got a great sound to it. And guys, I'm telling you, you can chuck this thing a mile. It really comes into play when those, especially like those spotted bass and stuff, come out up over deep water, blown up on shad. You could send this thing to them. But that 105 size is a perfect size for spots, smallies. I've caught so many giant smallmouth on that, and largemouth. They just eat it, okay? Has 3 hooks. We talked about that in that video. Try throwing a topwater that has 3 sets of trebles if possible. But that is my number 1 bait. Has a nice sound to it, okay? Now, With that said, in that same category, this guy right here, that is the Megabass Giant Dog X, and it's more of a subtle bait. Again, the beautiful colors that Megabass produces, but I like something that has a little less sound, or maybe is silent on those later evenings, early mornings, or those slick, calm conditions. So a walking bait with a feathered treble is my #1 bait for summertime. #1 topwater for summertime, because you can fish it around so many things. All right, guys. #2. Again, this was hard for me. I actually made my top 5, and I kind of reordered them because I throw a topwater probably February through November. Here on the TVA, you know, you can be throwing a frog. Some of the best frog fishing I've ever had is in like November, mid-November, like late in the year when that water starts dropping and you get all that grass on the surface. So I actually put a frog as my #2 summer topwater bait. Now, if you're a guy that's in that Highland Reservoir and you're fishing off main lake points and stuff, this probably won't apply to you. But say you sneak around to that secondary point and there's a little cove in the back, and maybe you have some hydrilla or some eelgrass or something like that, but you have the clearer water. Guys, this is probably my #1 frog. This is the Jackal Gavacho, specifically this color. I believe it's called, or chartreuse gill, something like that. I will link it down below in the video description, but I like this one. It has kind of the iridescent longer tail on it. More importantly, it's a ghosty color, and it is a popping frog. So Highland Reservoir, we talked about that, clear water. Lowland Reservoir, clear water. If you are a guy that has a lot of grass, but the grass is filtering that water and really cleaning it up, which grass does, right? And you need a clearer or a ghosty frog, specifically that color, guys. I mean, look at that thing. I have beaten the paint off of this thing. It is a do everything frog. This is a frog, backtrack. You cannot fish heavy grass mats with this frog, but you can do everything else. It walks like a dream, having that cup face, having that resistance. You can walk it like a walking bait. You can pop it like a popper, but it's weedless, 65-pound braid, and you can straight hurt some feelings with those hooks. So if you find yourself in sparse grass, along a grass line, or wanting to skip a frog up underneath a dock, you can't really skip a popper, but you can skip this guy. So when I made this list, go with my #2 specifically, I was thinking about that frog and that color right there. They just straight eat it. Whether you're popping it, or you're walking it, or you're skipping it, guys, that is a must if you are throwing a frog. Now, with that said, I'm gonna give you 2, because you're not always in that clear water, and you don't always need a poppin' frog. I like that poppin' frog because it adds a little bit of sound and some commotion, some spit on the surface. I can't tell you guys how many times I've thrown this frog, I'm walking it, bloop, 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 it's spitting back and forth, and I see a wake coming, and then it just stops, and I just sit there and I bloop, bloop, let it sit, boom, it eats on that second, that first or second just bloop after I get done walking it. Okay, if you find yourself in thicker grass, or you need a frog that doesn't have a poppin' face, excuse me, or you need something that has a little bit wider belly on it, something that makes more of a commotion on the grass, this guy right here. This is the snag proof Bobby's Perfect Frog. Out on the West Coast, Bobby Barrick, he is one of the originators of frog fishing out on the California Delta. You know, a few years ago, Snag Proof completely revamped their frogs, and they are awesome. Super soft, great hooks, great colors. They're kind of like a printed color, but if you are a guy that doesn't need a poppin' frog, that is probably my #1 traditional style frog. Now, in that video, like I said last week or 2 weeks, however long, my last video, whatever it was, I talked about putting some rattles in there if you need to, jig rattles or a cylinder drop shot weight. There's things you can do with this frog to make it make more commotion, to make it be able to cast farther, but we talked about that in that previous video, so I'm not gonna go into that much on that guy right there. But a frog, excuse me, is my #2 summer topwater bait. Just thinking about all the different things you can do with a frog, you can be more gutsy with it, right? I'm not gonna try and put my my popper right up against those cypress trees. You know, if I was confident in my angle and there wasn't any branches down, I could probably get that popper in there on a little roll cast. But with that frog on 65-pound braid, I could skip that thing up there. I could chuck it up there. If I do get hung up, I can pull it out. You can just be more gutsy with the poppin' frog over a popper. All right, so we talked about #2. #3, you know, again, picking the five was fairly easy for me, but narrowing it down to just 1 or 2 baits in that category was the tough part. You know, there's so many different styles of topwater baits. Toads and frogs and buzz baits and ploppers and poppers and walking baits and wake baits and you name it, right? And that's where it got tough. But for me, #3, I'm going with a Whopper Plopper. Specifically this size right here. And I'll give you guys some options, but that little 90 size with that little smaller propeller on there. Here's the traditional 110 size. You could even go to the 130 size, the bigger guy. But that 90, that 110, these are great sizes. I like that 90 because the subtle kick that it has. Again, this time of the year, these fish, if they're eating bait fish, if they're eating shad, this guy is lights out. You can cast it a long ways. It's easy to fish. You could throw it on a spinning rod. You could give it to your kid or your girlfriend or your wife if they're not that confident in throwing a bait caster. It's really easy to throw. Again, just a real subtle plop, 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 plop. As we are in earlier stages of summer, we don't have a lot of grass on the surface. So this thing, you know, here we have grass about 6, 8 inches, 10 inches below the surface. So I can cover a ton of water with a chuck and wind bait with the Whopper Plopper. The benefit over this versus a buzz bait is the fact that I can stop it. So I come near a shade line, or I come near somewhere where I think that they can ambush from a cypress tree trunk or a dock piling or something like that. I can pop it, or I can stop it and then plop it, and you can actually just change your cadence, whereas the buzzbait's gonna sink. But that guy right there, if you're on a fishery where those fish are chasing threadfin shad, that guy is perfect, okay? If you're on a fishery, a pond, or you know, something where they're eating bigger bluegill, that's when I'll go with the 110. I typically don't throw the 130 size as much anymore. That 110 size is about as big as I go. It still puts off a tremendous plop, but again, it just gets those big bites. I like to go with shad or bait fish colors. You know, got that one over there, that's chrome. This one's called monkey butt. But again, stout hooks. I do put a swivel on the front of my Whopper Ploppers. It just helps with the spinning and line twist. But a Whopper Plopper is my #3 topwater bait for summertime. Now, you guys are probably like, what? Well, you know what? It's really hard to limit to 5. So I know there's a bunch of buzzbait guys out there that love throwing, but I love throwing a buzzbait. So if you're a guy that doesn't throw the Whopper Plopper and you do throw a buzzbait, I got a tip for you. Add this bait to your category. This is a buzzbait by D&M. I'll link it down below in the video description. You can see I put a little shad colored horny toad on there, just helps keep this bait up. But a lot of guys are throwing really loud clacker double buzzbaits. I like to do the opposite if I'm throwing a buzzbait. I'm going with a single blade, a plastic blade. It's super subtle. Again, it's like those little poppin' bait fish on the surface. I'm going with a bait fish color, and again, putting that little horny toad on there adds a little kicker feet, and it just helps keep that bait up on the surface easier, and it also helps with skipping. But if you're a guy that doesn't throw the Whopper Plopper, I added one in here for you guys, the little single subtle buzzbait. That is a winner. All right, so that was number 3. Number 4 for me is going to be this guy right here. The popper, specifically the World Pop. You guys see that? That is called Flash Boost, okay? That is awesome. I can sit there and plop, 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 work that thing back and forth, pop, 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 sit it, and that thing just sits there. Those feathers kind of dance around in the water, and that Flash Boost just shows off that little bit of shimmy. Can't tell you how many times I've caught fish with that thing just sitting on the surface. But a popper is my number 4 category because you don't always fish around grass, right? Say you're on a fishery that doesn't have grass, but you have target specific structure or cover. That's when I'm making little flips or pitches or little roll casts back into shade lines or laydowns or round laydowns. And I don't want to cover a lot of water like the buzzbait or the plopper. I want to bloop, 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 and let it sit. Let that thing sit above those fish's heads. Where I think, like I said, the target casting, where I think those high percentage locations are, that's when I'm gonna go with a popper over the other baits. I might go with a walking bait, but again, that's covering it's covering a lot of distance, whereas the popper, bloop, I can let it sit. Bloop, bloop, let it sit. Again, that guy right there is a must. That came out a couple years ago, and it quickly rose to the top for me as a popper. Now, it is a close second. My other favorite is the Megabass. That's the Pop Max, okay? It's just a little bit bigger, okay? So if I am on a fishery that I feel like has bigger panfish or bigger bait fish, or I'm targeting bigger fish, I will go with that Pop Max over the World Pop. But if I'm looking for more of a finessey, quieter, smaller presentation, that's when I'm going with that World Pop. But with the Shimano, that World Pop, you get that Flash Boost. With the Megabass, you get something that spits and has some bubbles. It's got little holes in the cheeks right there that adds a little bit of a bubble trail. And then obviously you get the awesome colors that Megabass provides. But a popper is my number 4. Last but not least, I had to throw this in there only because some of my favorite summertime fishing is throwing this guy right here, the wake bait, specifically the tactical wake. That is something that Matt and I designed a few years ago, and we're extremely proud to bring that to market. But low light conditions, it's hot out. It's like 95 degrees right now. If I didn't want to be out right now and I wanted to come out this evening and say we had a full moon or almost a full moon, guys, I can't tell you how fun it is to throw summer topwater and throw summer big baits, okay? This thing is just, it's got that V that it puts off. It's got that, we designed that bill to kind of deflect. So if you are around grass lines or you are around laydowns, that bill is going to push that stuff down and around the hooks. But being able to chuck this thing out there, right? You can't see a lot of things, but you can hear the splash, especially if you're throwing topwater at night. If you hear the splash, that's a good sign. But you're just click, 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 click. That thing is making that big wake on the surface, and you hear the explosion. Guys, some of my favorite bites are nighttime wake bait fishing. So that is why I put that in as my number 5 summer topwater. Guys, if you're not into throwing wake baits during the day, guys, I challenge you to throw them at night. It is so much fun. You know, sometimes those fish, especially in clear water, sometimes those fish are kind of finicky to move up shallow with that high sun. You know, if they do, they're gonna pull into the shade lines. We talked about that, you know, those target specific areas. But when that sun drops and that moon comes up, or even a moonless night, a dark night, those fish will pull up in the shallow and they're eating bait fish. They're eating panfish, shad, gizzard shad. Throwing that big, easy, lazy, dumb meal is so much fun. When you hear that explosion, you don't know if it's a 2-pounder or a 10-pounder. It is a ton of fun. Now, with that said, I do want to talk about another category that's kind of like an emerging category. It's coming over from basically the saltwater side, and been playing around with 2 different baits. Let me talk about this one because I've caught so many fish on this guy right here. This is the Z-Man Hellraiser, and this necessarily isn't coming over from the saltwater side as much as the next one, but this is a chuck and wind bait, just like the Whopper Plopper, although it sinks, okay? But what's cool about this, it has that face, and it's just like a real subtle wag on the surface, and it just spits a little bit. But the benefit of this is it has that feathered treble down in the water. So if you're on those spots that are chasing bait, or you're on you know, largemouth out on a hump in a river system and they're coming up schooling, right? You chuck the Hellraiser out there and you just burn it, right? Straight retrieve, and that thing is going spitting on the top. But the whole time, that weighted back end and that treble is below the surface. So they come up, and when they hit and miss other top waters, they come up and they get that rear treble. So it is a funny looking bait. I don't think it's got a lot of hype behind it, but guys, this straight catches them. So I wanted to talk about that. As far as the buzz baits, I did want to talk about this too. If you're a guy that doesn't want to throw that big double buzz, try throwing the Suicide Buzz. This is by Big Bite. Comes with some swim baits on it. But again, this is a bait that's easily skippable. You can throw it under docks, but if you need that buzz bait fix, this is an awesome alternative. Now back to that kind of emerging category. This guy right here, that is the Nomad Dartwing. Now, when Matt and I first started playing around with this bait, it was okay, right? It didn't walk as good as some of my other favorite walking baits. It didn't pop as good as some of my favorite poppin' frogs, right? But what we've learned is this bait came over straight from saltwater. The best way to describe it is if you've seen some of those videos of those saltwater fish just coming full speed and they're burning top waters and that thing's skipping, right, and popping out of the water, and those big like GTs and stuff just come up and just eat it. That's what this is. It's just downsized. When you fish it with a burn, 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 pause, burn, 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 pause, right? You need to get those t-shirts, but burn, 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 pause. This thing is more like a straight retrieve and then pause, straight retrieve and then pause. And what this thing is doing, it's all over the place. It's skipping, it's all over the place. And you can walk it if you need to. Say you get blown up on it and they miss, then you can pause it and walk it. But this is a cool category of topwater, newer to me. Like I said, coming over from that saltwater side, but having that burn pause, it's a lot like the riser bait, the jackal. You know, it's just for those fish that are highly motivated to chasing down bait fish. That is where this bait comes into play. And then last but not least, guys, I want to talk about this hook right here. This is the Hayabusa. This is the TBL 930. This is an awesome hook upgrade. You guys know that we preach hook upgrades on all of our a lot of our baits, crankbaits, all that good stuff. But this is a bait, or this is a hook that we've been playing around on our topwater baits that doesn't, it's sticky sharp, it's super strong, and it just seems to hold a point really, really well. So if you guys haven't tried these hooks, they are amazing. So those guys, obviously the owner of the ST 36s, if you need a heavier hook, maybe the 56s, and then the Gamakatsus. But that guy right there is an awesome alternative as well. But guys, summertime topwater, I love it. I think I successfully narrowed it down to 5 categories, maybe 6, I'm not sure. But get out and throw some topwater, guys. Today's a perfect day. We got a summer storm coming in. We got some overcast. It is kind of muggy, it is hot, but it's still overcast. So those fish are gonna be out there roaming. So today I'd be throwing a bait that moves a ton of water, that I can cover a ton of water. The Whopper Plopper, the buzz bait. I'll be working that topwater fast. But guys, summertime topwater fishing, it is so much fun. I mean, topwater fishing is fun no matter what time of year, but summertime is when it shines. Whether you're fishing in grass with a heavy frog, or you're fishing out open water with a walking bait or a plopper or a popper, summertime topwater fishing, it is a blast. Guys, I will link all the different products down below in the video description, with some hook upgrades, some colors, all that good stuff, rods, reels, line recommendations. But guys, as always, we appreciate the support. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up. I want to hear your comments. I want to hear what your go-to summertime topwater is. So down in the comment section, let me know the type of fishery you're on and your maybe the bait fish that you're imitating or that they're feeding on, and then your favorite bait to get those fish to eat topwater. Guys, as always, like I said, thank you for the support. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button, and we will see you guys on the next video.